Alright, so welcome to this introduction on Adobe Muse. Now, one of the biggest questions about Adobe Muse is who is it targeted towards? Well, Adobe Muse is targeted towards graphic designers that want to build websites but don't know how to code. So this is not a developer-friendly tool. Basically, it doesn't allow you to edit any of the code. It allows you to inject some HTML, but that's really all there is to it. So unfortunately, if you're looking to create a website that's got a lot of dynamic features in there and so forth, Adobe Muse isn't really the tool for you. It generates basic flat HTML websites, so that means that it doesn't work with WordPress, Concrete 5 and other popular frameworks that are available on the web. So Adobe Muse is good for those who are good at graphic design and want to build their own website but don't want to write a single line of code. Also, Adobe Muse integrates very well with other Adobe products. So for example, you have Photoshop, you also have Adobe Edge Animate that allows you to create HTML and CSS animations and integrate that into your Adobe Muse project. Also with Adobe Muse you can create alternative layouts for different devices with smaller screen resolutions. So now what I want to do is very quickly show you the resources folder and we're going to see what files we're going to be working with in our project. Alright, so I'm going to open up my exercise folder called Envato Muse, and this is going to contain all of our files for this project. So right now we've just got an assets folder, but there will be an Adobe Muse file and also there'll be another folder that contains all the files that were exported from Adobe Muse. So when I go into assets, you'll be able to see it contains all of my images and so forth that are going to be placed inside my Adobe Muse file. Now Adobe Muse works fairly similar to Adobe InDesign in terms of layout and also with the way it deals with files. So when you place a file, it will actually remember and store that location of the file on your hard drive. So if you then delete that file, Adobe Muse is basically going to say, where is that file gone? So to keep everything nice and together, what I'm going to do is create an assets folder with all of the images and assets that I'm going to use inside of my Adobe Muse project. Also, you'll notice I have a gallery folder inside of here which just has 3 images that I'm going to use on the gallery widget. So that's going to be a pretty cool feature. So as you can see, I'm keeping everything nice and together. So what I want to do now is basically open up Adobe Muse and set up a brand new project. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. You can create a new site from the splash screen or simply go to File, New Site. And in there you'll get a dialog box. And first of all, it's going to ask you to define a couple of options right here. Now don't worry too much about these options that we have available to us. Basically it's just going to help us set up the guides and sort of get the sort of right layout for our website. But however, this can all be adjusted later on. So try not to worry too much about how you're going to set this all up, because you can always play around with the options and always change them at a later date. So first of all, it's asking us for an initial layout. Now Adobe Muse does not export your website out as a responsive design. So what that means is when you have a browser, for example, and the browser's, let's say, the full width of my screen, and then I decide to shrink the browser down, the website actually shrinks and tries to fit in that space. With Adobe Muse, it doesn't do that. It's not got that responsive design feature. What it has is a selective design. So if I am on a smartphone with a smaller screen resolution, it will automatically go to the phone version of the site. If I'm on a tablet with a slightly bigger screen, it will go to that version. And if I'm on a desktop, then I will obviously get the desktop version of the site. And the reason why I say start out with the desktop version is because the desktop version normally contains everything that your site requires and you don't have to sort of cut things out, which is normally what you have to do with the tablet and phone version, where you have to say, right, well, I've got to hide this or something like that. So start out with the desktop version and then bring it downwards from there. So desktop, which is the largest, it's got everything on it, all the bells and whistles, and then you go down to the tablet version and then you go down to the smartphone version. Also, you'll notice we have the ability to set the page width, and also we can set a minimum height. Again, all of this can be adjusted later on. So the minimum height, I'm just going to set this to 500. You'll notice this says minimum. It's not basically setting the height, and you can't adjust that later on. Of course you can adjust that. And also I'm setting the page width to 960 pixels. And right here you'll be able to see I can define the amount of columns. Now I like working with 12 columns because that makes it easier to sort of lay out our design and position elements that are on our page. And as you can see right here, I've got 12 columns, column width is 58 pixels, and the gutter is 20 pixels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the gutter down to about 10 pixels. And as you can see, it's adjusted everything nicely. You'll also notice that we have this sticky footer tick box. So basically, let's say that this is my browser window, and let's say the page is 500 pixels, so it ends around about there. Well, my footer is going to be sort of floating in midair. I really want it to stick to the bottom of the page. So if there isn't enough content to actually push the page down and make sure the footer goes all the way to the bottom, then I want to use sticky footer. And that way what happens is it actually makes the footer stick to the bottom of the browser even if the page isn't big enough. So I'm just going to leave that checked. Then we have the ability to change the margins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically link these all together and set the margin to 0. I don't really like working with margins for my main design, so I'm just going to get rid of them altogether. You'll also notice that when I'm adjusting these values, it's also adjusting, the page width and also a lot of other things as well, such as the columns width and so forth. Then we have the ability to have padding. Now, normally I have no padding on the top and no padding on the bottom, but I'm going to leave it on for this example right here, just so you can see how Adobe Muse works with it. But again, on the fly, you can adjust that no problem in design mode, so don't worry about it at all. But I am going to center it horizontally so it stays in the middle of the screen. Otherwise, if you untick that, it will just stay all the way over to the left. So now that I've got that all set up, and again, you can always come back and change this, just click OK, and it's created this Adobe Muse file. What I now need to do is obviously save that file, so I can go to File, Save Site, or Command S. And by the way, for the Windows users, if I say Command S, it's Control instead of Command. So I'm just going to open up the websites folder, Envato Muse, which is my resources folder, and then I'm just going to give my site its name, so we'll just call this Tut, and just hit save. And now you'll be able to see that there is my Muse file. Now that we're back in Muse, basically we have a few options available to us. So right at the top of the window, you'll be able to see we have the plan section. So the plan section allows us to view the entire sitemap and all the pages that are in our site, and also we get to look at the master pages as well. Then we have design mode. So this is when you're editing a page in particular, whether that be a page in your sitemap or whether that be a master page, and you want to change the look and feel of it, you will go into design mode. Then you have preview mode. Preview mode basically allows you to preview the page inside of Adobe Muse instead of actually going out to the browser. However, you do have that option available to you. Then you have publish. Publish allows you to publish to Business Catalyst. Then we have a few options right here. So for example, we could switch off thumbnails. So let's say I have a really big website and there's loads and loads of pages with all different thumbnails and it's starting to slow down my computer. You can easily switch thumbnails off. I'm going to leave them on for the time being though. Also, I can decide to show the master badge. So for example right here I can see which master applies to which page, so I recommend leaving that on. Then you can also choose the thumbnail size. So if you've got a really big sitemap, you might want to push that down a little bit so you can see more of your sitemap. Then we have these three buttons right here. We have desktop, tablet and phone. So obviously they're the different layouts. However, I haven't provided a tablet layout and I also haven't provided a phone layout, and that's why it's got the little plus button next to it. And when I click that, it'll ask me to add a new layout, and then I get a new dialog box with all those different options again. So we'll be covering that later on, but however at the moment I'm just going to be dealing with the desktop layout version. So as you can see, it's opened it up in a nice little tab right here. And here you'll see on the top half of this tab, I basically get the sitemap, so that will show me all the pages. On the bottom half, I have the master pages. The master pages are effectively like a template. So if I change the look and feel of this master page, it will change the look and feel of the pages that have that master applied to them. So what I can do is I can actually add more pages. So as a general rule with the sitemap, the things to the left hand side have more priority to the pages on the right hand side, and the pages that are at the top have more priority than the pages at the bottom. So what we have basically here is the top left, which is obviously the home page, the most important page of your site. Then if I add another page to the right of that, so it's still on the top level, but however it's got less priority because it's further over to the right. And again, you can just keep adding pages, and then you also have the plus button right here that's underneath the page. That'll actually create a child page of that page. So this now I can add more pages, then I can go in and just create some really beautiful and complex sitemaps right there. So what I'm going to do is delete all of those. So you can easily delete a page by just hovering over it. You get that nice blue outline, you get the plus buttons and everything else, and you also get that little cross. So that allows you to delete a page. If you want to rename a page, all you got to do is double click on its label right there, and then just change it. So I'm going to have about and contact. So I'm going to have a very simple website, nothing really complex there. Also, you'll be able to see in the brackets that it says a master, so I know that this master is applied to all of those pages. And again, you can add as many masters as you would like. So we've got master B and master C. So if you want to, let's say, apply this master B page to the about page, then what I'd do is I'd simply drag and drop, and there you go, it will change it to B master. And again, I could apply that to that one as well, so that one's B master, and that one could be C master. So all you got to do is basically select the master you want, drag it and drop it. So what I'm going to do is delete those master pages right there. Obviously you've got to have at least one master page. It may not be in use though, because as you can see right here, it says this hasn't got a master and neither is that page or that page. So you don't have to use the master page, but however, what I recommend doing is actually using a master page. So then all you have to do is edit one page, and then you can change the look and feel of all the other pages that have that master applied to them. So I'm just going to drag and drop. I'm going to change the name from A master to main, and there we go, it's changed all those master badges. Okay, so now what I want to do is take a look at editing a page. So whenever you want to edit a page, all you've got to do is hover over that page. In this case it's my master page, and then once you get that nice blue outline on there, just double click and it will open the page up in a new tab, and it will obviously open that up in design mode. So this will allow me to add elements to the page and change the style of the page. Then I can go over to the preview button, and that will allow me to preview the page inside of Adobe Muse. I can also go back to design mode, open up the file menu and say preview page in browser. And so that allows me to preview it in my default browser, in this case it's Safari. So that's a really nice feature of Adobe Muse. So now let's take a look at how our page is actually structured, and then we'll go through the main tool set. So if you want to open up the file menu and go to site properties, you'll actually be able to see that I have all the options available to me that I had when I set the site up. So I have the page width, I have the columns, I have the column widths, and so on and so forth. But however, some of these options you don't actually have to change inside of site properties. So for example, I have the padding top and padding bottom as 36 pixels. and I can actually change them on the fly in design mode without having to go into the site properties. So this guide right here defines where the top of the page starts, so I can drag that all the way up to the top, so there's 0 pixel padding from the top. Then if I hover over this guide, you'll be able to see it's basically defining the header. So wherever we have a gap between the top of the page guide and the header guide, that is actually defining the area for the header. And again, you could have the header guide above the top of the page. It's entirely up to you. But I like having it below because then I get these nice columns in here, so I can actually lay stuff out properly in the header. Then down here you can see I have the footer guide. Again, I can drag that down. I can't drag that below the bottom of the page. So anything in between the footer and the bottom of the page guide is the footer area. And then we have the bottom of the browser window. So again, I could add a bit of padding on there and perhaps maybe put a logo in there and so on and so forth. But what I'm going to do is drag that all the way up so the bottom of the browser meets the bottom of the page. Again, it's entirely circumstantial. You may want that, you may not want that. So then what I can do is now quickly preview this inside of Adobe Muse, and you'll see there is my main content area, and you'll see that this is the entire view inside of the browser. So as you can see, where you can see that dark grey colour, that is actually the background colour of the entire page. Where you can see this light grey sort of patterned area, that basically means that is off limits essentially. Then we have this area right here, so class that as your main content area. You don't really want to be putting content outside of that area when it comes to actually designing up and putting content in your pages right there. So you want to keep stuff constrained and nice and clean. But however, you know, you can put elements out there. It's entirely up to you, but stuff can get a little bit messy. But however, if you want to drag that down and, you know, put a logo up there, put a navigation up there, that's absolutely fine. But I just like keeping everything nice and neat. Okay, so now let's say that when I preview this, I don't really want them to actually see the boundaries of the main content area. So let's go back into design mode, and I want to change the fill. So when I do that, I just click on that drop down arrow, and I'm just going to click on that square with the red line in there, which basically sets it to none, so it has no fill. And I'm going to do the same for the stroke and set that to none. So now you are unable to see the actual boundaries of the content area, which is what I want for my design. You may be completely different. You may want to actually put in a background color right there. Also, we can change the browser fill. So what I can do is drop that down. I can change this to a completely different color altogether. Again, just drag and drop, and it will give you a live preview. But also, as a general rule, when you see these blue links right here, if you click on them, what will happen is it will drop down and show you even more options that are available to you. So now I can change the background color of the page just like I could before, but also I can apply a gradient to it. So for example, I could go to that sort of color. I'm just going to change that back to solid. I can also apply a background image. So if I click the folder icon, I can go to my assets directory, and then I can select my Envato main.jpg file. So now I'm actually applying a background image to the actual page itself. Then what I can do is also change the way it fits. I could say original size. So as you can see right there, basically it's just plumping that in right there, and it's keeping the original size, which is fine, but as you can see, this is a little bit too big. We're only getting the top of that little leaf logo right there, so that's far too big. Tile does pretty much exactly the same thing, apart from it just keeps repeating it over and over and over again. Tile horizontally just means it will basically repeat on the x-axis. Tile vertically repeats on the y-axis or repeats downwards. Then you also have scale to fit. So this will actually try to fit it within the constraints of the browser window. So I don't really want that. I mean, it's okay, but the problem is we get this background color right here. And let's just very quickly change the background color to sort of match that sort of putty color that we have. So I'm just going to drop that down, and I'm going to select the eyedropper tool, and that will allow me to grab a swatch right there, and then there we go. It's never going to be perfect because obviously we've got gradients in here, but that looks pretty good. So instead of saying scale to fit, I'm going to say scale to fill. So that way, for example, even if the width is larger than the height, it will still scale to the width, and that way it sort of fits and fills the entire area, which is really nice. Then also I get to choose the positioning. So at the moment it's at the top left. I really want to actually center this, so I'm going to hit that little center square right there, and it's going to center the background image. Also I can say scrolling, but I'm just going to leave it with scrolling on, and I'm just going to click off that now. And we could also apply again a fill to our main content area that we have right there. And also again we could apply a background image again where I can see that blue text with the dotted underline. I click on that and it gives me more options, and then again I could select this as a gradient. I could also apply a different background image, so for example this right here. I could say keep it the original size. I could tell it to scale to fill, and I could put that in the center, and so on and so forth. So again, you really do have an immense amount of control over how your actual page is going to look and feel. But right now I don't actually want any fill, so I'm going to set that to none, and I'm also going to hit that little trash icon right there, which will clear the background image out. Okay, so now what I want to do is take a look at this main tool set up here. So here are your main tools. You have obviously your pointer that allows you to select things, move things around, and also you can scale some things as well. Then you have the crop tool. You can press C on your keyboard to get that. So that's just basically for cropping images and so forth, but obviously not background images. Then you have the text tool, and you'll notice this little tiny arrow down here. That means there's more options if you actually hold that down, and when you hold that down you'll be able to see the text tool is T, the vertical text tool is Shift and T, so you can constrain your text vertically if you want to. Then you have the zoom tool, Z for that, and then you have the hand tool for panning around, which is H, and then also what we have is the rectangle tool, which is M on the keyboard, that basically allows you to put in a div, which is like a container inside of our page. But it can be used for multiple different things, but mainly it's used as a container, and you can add styling to it, background images and so forth. And then of course you have your main pointer tool, which is of course V. So you can quite easily see that there's not very many tools as such, because you don't need that many, especially when it comes to web design. You just need the basics, and then you need tons of options to actually style it the way you want it to be in the browser. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I want to actually draw out a container area for our header. So I'm going to press M on the keyboard, and so that's going to grab the rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw this out like so, and we'll pop this in here. So what I'm going to do is press V on the keyboard to get my pointer tool, and I'm just going to fit it into that header area. And if you click this double arrow right here, you'll be able to collapse the panels and move them off to the side. So now what I can do is quickly preview that. So there you go, you can see it's created a div with a white background and a 1 pixel border. So what I want to do is basically get rid of the border first of all, and I want to change the fill just to a nice chocolate colour. I don't really want to add a background image in there. If you wanted to, again, just click on fill right there, it'll give you more options, and then you can obviously put a background image in there. But however, I'm just going to leave it like that for now, because I want to explain the difference between constrained sizes on our rectangles versus actually stretching the entire browser width. So when I preview this, you'll be able to see it is constrained to that width. It will always be that width. But however, you can see here that if I grab the hand tool and sort of move this across by pressing H on the keyboard, you can see that we have this area right here and this area right here. And let's say that I want this header to stretch all the way across the browser window. The problem is though that you've got all these different desktops and laptops with bigger and smaller screens. So what Adobe Muse does is very cleverly, it understands that when you stretch this out all the way to the left edge of the page right here and all the way to the right edge of the page like so, and then preview it, it will actually set the width to 100%, and that way if you have a much larger screen, again it will scale that in proportion to the actual size of the screen, or you could push it inwards, and as you can see it is actually scaling down to that size. Obviously when you go too small, when you actually go into the actual main content area that we have, which is this right here, which is about 950 pixels, then obviously you're going to get that scroll bar in there. So as you can see, that's how to actually get your containers to stretch 100%. So now you're working with percentages, which is a lot more fluid than just having fixed sizes. But again, that's entirely circumstantial. You may want that, you may not want that. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So what I want to do now is open up my layers palette. So let me just open that up again so we can see all these panels that we have right here, and I want to open up the layers palette, and as you can see we've got layer 1. That's fine, but it doesn't really show me any descriptive text about what's in that layer. So what I can do is rename that layer by double clicking on it, and I'm going to rename it to header. And again, it's very easy. You know, you can lock your layers and you can also hide your layers as well, just like you normally would with other Adobe software. And again, we have our rectangle right here. Okay, so now that I've done that, what I want to do is I want to add some text to my header. So I'm going to grab the text tool, T on the keyboard, and I want to basically draw this out like so. So I have a little bit of text right here, and I want to say something like welcome. And I want to change the color of the text. So I'm just going to drop that down, change the color. I also want to change the font size right here. So let's increase the font size. And then what I want to do is grab my pointer tool and just select my header's rectangle right here, and then I want to open up my align panel, and then I'm going to say align to selection, and then I'm going to say align to the vertical center. Then what I want to do is take a look at changing the font face, because at the moment what we've got is Arial. So if I drop the text down right here, you'll be able to see we have web safe fonts. These are basically okay to use in all browser and operating systems. You're pretty much guaranteed to have those installed. Then you have system fonts. These are the fonts that are installed on your computer. Now you can use these fonts, that's absolutely fine, but however, what it will do is it will export it out as an image. So it will flatten the text and export it out as an image, and you may not want that. So if you want to have a custom font and you still want it to be readable text in HTML when you export it out, you need to add a web font. So I'm going to add a web font, and as you can see it opens up what's called Typekit, and that gives you hundreds and hundreds of fonts that you can actually choose from, and you have all your styles across the top here, so you can choose some really fancy fonts, because obviously you can't start embedding some of these fonts that you've got installed on your computer because that may infringe some copyrights. So what we need to do is basically I'm going to choose this Handley font, and we're just going to choose that, and as you can see it's got this nice little scribble text. I can also tell it to slant, so that looks pretty good. And let's also take a look at perhaps making it a bit bolder. Okay, we'll leave it like that for now. So it hasn't really made much of an effect when I've told it to slant and go to bold, but let's preview that. And as you can see, it has gone bold and it has slanted slightly over. So sometimes the design view is not as accurate as when you go into preview mode. Alright, so we are running out of time right now, so I'm going to go back in design mode, and I'm just sort of going to fix this up a little bit so that we get this looking pretty nice. Just moving that across. Okay, so then go ahead and hit preview. Yeah, that's okay. Sometimes, again, because in design mode the typography isn't quite right and you scale it in a bit too much, and then you go back to preview again, you'll see that it pushes it down. So we really don't want that. So make sure that you always double check. Okay, so that's looking pretty nice. Now I want to open up my widgets library, and I want to expand the menu section, and you have the choice of a horizontal menu or a vertical menu. So I'm going to choose horizontal in my case and drop that in. And of course Adobe Muse will manage this menu, so if you add pages and so forth, it will actually manage all of that for you. You don't have to worry about that. Also, whenever you add a widget, you always have this little blue button off to the right of the widget. When you click that, it opens up an options panel that allows you to look at all the options available for that widget, whether it be a slideshow or whatnot. But however, it's very easy to customize this widget. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to select the widget and then select my header rectangle, and then I'm going to open up the align panel, and then I'm going to align it in the vertical center. And don't forget, I've got align to selection on, and I'm going to position this up so that it's going to line up with my grid. So then what I want to do is customize this because it's not looking very nice. I don't like the font, first of all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click and I'm going to select that text right there. And then once I drop the text menu down and I select a different text, let's say Arial, and let's increase the font size a little bit. As you can see, that makes it look a little bit clearer, a little bit nicer. I can change the background color, so I can select the rectangle and I can change the background color to be something a little bit darker like that. That looks pretty good. And then also what you have is you have the menu item state. So you can also go to your states panel, and if you've worked with Adobe Fireworks, this should be pretty much second nature to you, where you have the rollover state. So when they've actually got their mouse hovered over that particular button in the menu, it's going to go to that state. Then you have mouse down, and then you have active, which I'm pretty happy with that. I'll leave it like that for now, but I'll just change that state to be dark. So there we go. You can also change the states right there, so you can view the different states and then change them accordingly. And once you've changed one of the states, that will change all the states for these buttons as well. So all of them, when they're rolled over, will look like that with that dark chocolate color. And again, you could change the font and everything else. So it really does give you immense control over how your website will actually look and feel. And also you can scale this widget, so everything is pretty much scalable. So I'm just going to scale this all the way out like so. Let's just collapse this panel so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so I'm going to have a few buttons over here, but we'll leave it like that for now. And so what I want to do is I want to basically put in a footer right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press M to get my rectangle tool, which is basically going to create a div element. And then I'm going to draw this out. And again, I want it to go 100% of the browser's width. So therefore, I'm going to make sure it touches the left and right edge. And I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger, like so. Perhaps maybe moving this up slightly. And then putting this in like so. And before we continue, let's make sure that we're keeping our layers organized. So what I want to do is open up the layers palette, and I want to add in a new layer. Double click on that layer and I'll call this footer. You can click OK to that, and then I'm going to drop that below the header layer, and then I'm going to select that rectangle, and I can see that that is that rectangle right there because I've got that little icon that's filled in. So I want to drop that into the footer layer. Okay, so now that I've done that, what I'm going to do is get rid of the stroke, and also what I'm going to do is change the background color to be a dark brown sort of color like that. Alright, so now that I've done that, I'm going to copy and paste and put that below. Make sure it touches the bottom of the page because I want this one to be a different color. So I'm going to change the fill color to be white. Alright, so now once I've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the text tool, draw out a text field, and this one's going to say copyrights, all rights reserved. And then I'm going to align the text in the center, increase the font size, change the font color to white, and then I'm going to select the container and then align it to that container or rectangle. And then I'm going to copy and paste, put that down here. I'm going to select the text, change it to thank you. And I'm going to change the font color to this sort of dark chocolate color, and then I'm going to change the font to Handley, and I'm going to change the font size to 14, something like that. Then I'm going to align it to that rectangle right there, or container, and there we go. Alright, so now that I've actually done that, what I'm going to do is, again, have a look at my site properties, and don't forget that you can always enable sticky footers from there. And you'll see that these two objects that we have the footer checkbox right there ticked. So what I'm going to do is very quickly preview this, and it's going to warn me that this font right here isn't meant to be bold, and it also isn't meant to actually have italics on there as well. It's not got that font style, but the browser's doing it anyway, but you can ignore that, it's not a big deal. So as you can see, I've got my text down here, and it's sticking to the bottom of the browser window. Now if you do have trouble with this, number one, make sure that you do have that footer ticked, but it's looking pretty good, and we've got the overall look and feel of our website. So in the next tutorial we'll be looking more at working with PSDs, we'll be looking at adding content, using paragraph styles, and a whole host of other features that are available to us in Adobe Muse. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, hope you've learned a lot, and see you in the next one.